All right. How's it going, ladies and gentlemen? Happy New Year to everyone. Yeah, it's been a little bit since I've been on. Decided to take Monday off to kind of relax. Did want to talk about what's going on in the market today. I wanted to take a little look at what's going on in the crypto market and kind of the dismantling of the current crypto market and talk about what's going to emerge a little bit here in the future. Also, there's some big news in labor that you guys might not be aware of how impactful it might be. And it's not going to help inflation, I'll tell you that much. And also, if you are interested in how all of the uploading to 23andMe, Ancestry, and all that is working right now in terms of genetic genealogy, what that's going to do, sort of the future of law enforcement. If you've been paying attention to my channel for a long time, then you would know when I kind of talked about how some of this stuff worked about 2 years ago. I kind of wasn't ready to show you the work that I had done on that. I have some of that family tree stuff done, and I can show you how you can find someone with less than a 1% match in DNA, which is really, it's the 1/10 of 1% of DNA that is not common to all humanity, that is just common to individuals that we're talking about here. And you can use that 1% of 1/10 of 1% in order to backtrack and find anybody. And I'm telling you that I can basically find anyone, whether or not they know that you exist. And that is true of almost everyone in the United States. A couple of years ago, when I read the statistic, it was 60% of the people in the United States can be identified by any DNA sample, whether or not they've taken a DNA test. I believe that number today it's probably 100% beyond a doubt, and I'll show you how that works. So it's close to 100%. So Deweese or Bram, as usual, has some of the best comments out there. My New Year's resolution is to be able to wish you all a happy new year in January 2024. We all hope that is the case, Bram. And you always bring insightful comments to the channel. And I wanted to thank you for being a longtime subscriber. But yeah, so let's talk a little bit about what went on with the market today. Market's down 330 points. The Dow Jones down 330 points. The S&P 500 down 42, and the NASDAQ down 1.43. The NASDAQ is, as usual, consistently more volatile than the Dow Jones. Not a ton of specific news today that would really affect the market other than this. Jobless claims coming in at a little bit higher, lower than expected, rather. But let's talk about what that means in terms of the numbers we're looking at, because I'm telling you, it's not all that significant. So jobless claims and ADP data point to continued tight jobs market. And I think for a number of reasons, that's the case. I covered that in one of my previous videos where I talked about no one wanting to work and how that just wasn't true. That everyone in the 18 to 65 age group is essentially working at this point. We're at near full employment. They're at under 3% unemployment. We're also in the age of the side hustle. Like, I'm one of those people that should probably be looking for work based on statistics, but I just have a whole crap ton of side hustles and don't actually have to have a real job. So I don't know how I am counted in those unemployment figures. I am probably not. So, but the number of Americans filing for first-time unemployment claims last week fell more than expected. The Labor Department reported that initial jobless claims declined to 204,000 in the week ending December 31st, which is the lowest level since September and below economists' expectations of 230,000. Revised claims last week from last week were 223,000. Basically, a difference of 24,000 in this sample of data, to me, is not statistically significant at all. In fact, it doesn't tell us anything at all about the state of the jobs market. I don't know the quality of jobs that were being added in that time frame. I don't know the quality of jobs that were being lost in that time frame, but I can count up just the number of layoffs that were done in the month of December. And this is why this isn't always accurate, but I can count the number of layoffs that were done just in San Francisco, and it's over 100,000. And I have to believe that there were more layoffs across the country, and there are going to be more people filing for first-time unemployment benefits. And let's also remember that there is there are severance packages that these people are getting too. So I think unemployment claims are likely to be higher going forward, as we're really just seeing mass layoffs. And we're also looking at other technology companies like Amazon announcing big layoffs today. So the National Employment Report for December from ADP showed that the economy added 235,000 private sector jobs last month, higher than the 145,000 jobs economists expected. So that's more significant, but with the numbers being so low, typically in a normalized environment, when jobless claims go above $350,000, that's or 350,000 individuals per week. That's when you start to see a deteriorating labor market, which would probably put downward pressure on wages at that point. But yeah, in this environment where we've been under 350,000 for so long, I'm just not sure how important that is. Okay. So that's sort of the big news here too. I got a lot of people wishing me a happy new year. I wanted to say thank you for the happy new year wishes. And also wanted to say, don't forget, because I always forget to remind you guys to check out my Patreon when you get a chance. And just to remind you that I am turning on the super chat features and monetization as we speak. I do forget to do this sometimes. But anyway, so for the last couple of days, guys, I will admit I've been a little bit distracted by the Idaho murders, of course, all of the police work that's gone into that. And I've been reading and watching a lot of true crime stuff. So I've been a little bit distracted from YouTube stuff. That's been for a while. That's been the case for a while, guys. And I want to thank you guys, if you are my subscribers, for sticking with me for so long. So I just wanted to say that over the holidays, make sure that you guys are checking in on your friends. The potential for people to fall deeper into, thank you very much, Chris Palmer, but the potential for people to fall deeper into depressions or any type of mental illness during the holidays is really acute. And you making a phone call to one of your friends is really going to help them out and could save a life. Okay. So let's move on a few questions here today. I read today that NIO CEO in an article recognized where NIO is going wrong. Do you think NIO should be releasing new models when they can't get production up for current models? That's actually something that I was thinking about just today. And I was just thinking about how, Tesla's product line has really been stagnant for quite some time now. And they haven't introduced a new vehicle for, I want to say it's been since 2019 or something, or 2016. I don't know. It's been quite some time. And their line is kind of stagnant. So they really absolutely, Tesla absolutely needs to introduce new models to this point to refresh on that model, also to expand to different markets. Now, they haven't reached anywhere near what you could call saturation in the markets that they already have. I'm looking at that sedan market for the Model 3. I'm looking at the luxury sedan model for the Model S, and for the I don't even know what to call the Model Y, because it's not an SUV like they say, or a crossover SUV like they say. It's basically another four-door sedan. But they definitely have other markets to exploit. Now, the Cybertruck is supposed to play a big part in that, but I think it's a big gamble on whether or not we really see the sales that we think we're going to look at, especially now that you start to see a lot of competition entering the market, especially with the Ford Lightning. I'm starting to see the first Ford Lightnings around here. There's quite a few Rivians that I see now, at least on a daily basis. I'm seeing Rivians, and not just the guy that owns a Rivian in my neighborhood, but when I went out to lunch the other day with my wife and my daughter, we ended up seeing a Rivian parked in the parking lot, and my wife looked at me all crazy because I got excited about it. It was just a different color. That's all. Yeah. So, but anyway, I do think that NIO in particular, because their production is so low and the fact that they have so many models, that it doesn't matter if they would have a vehicle model that was enormously popular, there is no way they could produce enough of them to meet demand. And part of that is I think they have 6 or 7 models in production right now. And I think that their maximum production they could make is about 20,000 units per month at this point. Maybe it's a little bit higher. I haven't looked at NIO's production figures, like their production capacity for about 3 or 4 months. Okay. But I'll go back and take another look at NEO. It is definitely still a popular stock, even though it's not something that I have a concentrated holding in anymore. I've exited out of most of my NEO stock and just have a few placeholder shares at this point, and I have a much larger holding in XPeng, which has also got beaten up at this point. I will say one thing with both the CEO of NEO and XPeng, they are doing something that you see a lot of Japanese CEOs do, but you don't see a lot of American CEOs do. In the past, you wouldn't see a lot of Chinese CEOs doing this, but they're admitting when they've done things incorrectly and sort of announcing, "Hey, we really screwed up, and this is where we're going to make changes." That is really a huge change in business culture. Anywhere really, not just in China, but a huge change in business culture for China. It would be a huge change in business culture if that actually happened here in the United States. Not so much for Japan. There's a long history of Japanese CEOs basically begging forgiveness from shareholders when they really screwed up. So that I do find very interesting. And I do find that it could be really positive. And tell 666999, wanted to thank you for the super sticker as well. Yeah, I generally they always tell you in the YouTube guidelines that you're supposed to remind people that you have these features on, and to do that every live stream. I almost never do it, but I always want to acknowledge the people that do buy me cups of coffee and things like that. Chris, who also gave me a super chat, is also a member of my Patreon. He's been a long time member of my Patreon. We have some great discussions in there, so check that out and you get a chance. Deweese makes the point about how would you recognize lightning if you were not looking for it versus a Cybertruck? That is true. I am certain that I have missed several lightnings before, even though I'm definitely looking for them now. It is likely that I've missed a bunch of Ford F-150 lightnings because they are not distinct from any of the other Ford F-150s that are out there. I think the first one I noticed is because the tailgate was down and I saw a bunch of stuff on the interior of the bed, and I was like, okay, this is one of the Ford Lightnings. And then I started really paying closer attention to it. So they've been being sold here. Everything that is sold here is basically sold almost instantaneously. It's even hard to get a test ride in one of these vehicles, but I did manage to get a test ride in one of the vehicles. I haven't had a chance to take. It's just a test ride, guys. I didn't get a chance to put it through its paces or anything like that. Not that I would do that with any car that I own, but it was pretty interesting. And I'm struggling to see really, if you're the level of car user that I am, I'm struggling to see where Tesla is really going to differentiate themselves from the competition at this point. Now, I know that there are a whole host of ways in which Tesla is technologically superior to a lot of other vehicles that are out there. But just in the case as it is with electronics, like, does somebody really care that they're buying an Android phone that is 2 generations behind the latest Apple phone? No, they do not. There's a market for one type of person, and there's a market for that other type of person. I've even made the point when we're looking at like GM's Ultium technology, like how much worse their battery technology is compared to Tesla's battery technology, and realize that as long as the cars have similar range, nobody actually really cares about that other than me, right? So this is my worry with Tesla. I have a lot of my my overall net worth tied up into Tesla. And of course, that has really hurt since last year. I'm really hoping for a better year this year. So it's been a long time. Haven't seen you since last year. Yes, thank you very much. And Oog, I'm really hoping that you managed to get into the Discord discussion through the channel benefits page. And I'm looking forward to seeing you there in the chat. I haven't been on that for about 3 days now, so I haven't checked that out, but I will later on today. Okay, so let's move on a little bit to crypto news here. And so we have the fact that Kraken has suspended operations in Japan at this point, which means they still have U.S. operations going, but they suspended operations at this point because they could not keep current with Japanese regulations. We also have this right here. Crypto lender Genesis is considering bankruptcy and lays off 30% of its staff. One of my chief complaints years ago when I was studying crypto was, how do they use leverage? That is the basis of the banking system, is the ability to use leverage to create economic benefit. And my idea, and they're able to use leverage because the relatively predictable decay in the value of the dollar versus the interest you're paying on the loan. And that is one of the things that makes the banking system not fundamentally sound, because it is not fundamentally sound. Banks go out of business all the time. You just don't necessarily hear about it. In any year, there's not a year that goes by that dozens of banks don't go out of business and they end up getting backstopped by the FDIC. The FDIC is there really to prevent a loss of faith in the industry, to backstop deposits for regular folks to a certain amount, and to arrange an orderly asset sale of the bank should it go under to a more to a better capitalized institution. That's what the FDIC really does, is it maintains order and faith in the banking system. No such thing exists for the crypto industry. There is no Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation. There's no SIPC, which is it's the Securities Investors Protection Corporation, and the SIPC just protects holders not from loss in terms of investments. It protects you in terms of like fraud or bankruptcy of the actual securities holder or the brokerage that you go through. None of that existed in the crypto industry. When all these crypto companies started coming out with ways to leverage the business, I was not in favor of regulation. To a degree, I'm still not in favor of regulation because we just don't know how that's going to work, and trying to define how that works right now is going to be severely problematic in terms of clamping down on innovation. And this is what I really worry about, is that this crisis could be what spurs the innovation and the coalescence around security and practice standards that evolve naturally out of the industry. Because we did have that evolve naturally out of the industry alongside government regulation back in the Great Depression, when before the Great Depression, when the FDIC was founded. I'm not saying that's what we need for the crypto industry, but we do need a little bit more in the way of standardization. This is going to get rid of a lot of pretenders. There are 20,000 plus cryptocurrencies out there, with 99.9% of them being worthless, utterly worthless. They're not even Ponzi schemes. That's not the right way to say that. It is literally just pump and dump schemes for a lot of these things. So this crypto lender, and this is one of the things, there were no rules in terms of what you could do with customer funds. No rules in terms of the capitalization that you needed. No rules in terms of your deposit requirements that were needed in terms of crypto. And with an asset that is as volatile as cryptocurrency is, to me, these crypto lending sort of businesses were always really, really risky. I don't think I ever said they were doomed to fail, but that would have been a correct assessment. But I never actually said that. Most of these companies you couldn't invest in, but even then, I didn't even hold any of my money at any of the ones except Coinbase, which I get consistently made fun of for holding it at Coinbase, right? So second on that list here is Silvergate. I think that they are staring bankruptcy in the face right now, and they just plunged 46% as crypto bank cuts 200 jobs. But yeah, what is the big they currency and has off $90 billion related to its acquisition of technology and assets association from the Facebook parent, from Facebook's attempt to cryptocurrency pegged or other stable asset. So what we're likely going to find out, and this is probably going to hit Binance next, Binance or Binance, however you want to pronounce that, is probably likely the next crypto exchange to go under. And one of the reasons why is that the largest part of the reserves, if 40% of their reserves, which comprises the largest part of the reserves, is denominated in their own token. Okay. So there is not a way to objectively value that. And the sort of statements of solvency that were released by all of the, I think it was Marin's was the accounting firm. This may actually bring down this accounting firm too, just like Arthur Andersen was brought down by the scandal associated with Enron. And I think I've mentioned this before, that I like when Enron collapsed, I was actually working for Arthur Andersen as an IT specialist, but at Enron, and nobody told me to go home until the company like collapsed that day, right? So and it was just, and I never even got paid for some of the work that I did there. But this is possibly likely to bring them down. Coincidentally, this firm is also the firm that has been doing Donald Trump's taxes for quite some time. So I'm expecting there to be a giant mess in the future when it comes to Marins. I think it's the name of the company is Marins. I can't actually remember. It's not one of the big four, but it's one of the companies that had the most experience in crypto. Experience in crypto is not going to be a phrase that is worth that much going forward. Whatever crypto looked like 6 months ago or a year ago, it's going to look totally different in the future. I'm still very curious to see where this goes. I'm still very curious to see not just crypto for crypto's sake. I'm really curious to see where blockchain technology goes in the future, because I think it's something that really has potential. The problem is that with any technological innovation where there was tons of potential, you're going to see a lot of people looking to exploit that fraudulently, or not even necessarily consciously fraudulently. They just don't know what they're doing. And I think this is the case with a lot of people that are in blockchain, is they don't actually understand what blockchain does. They just know that it's cool and they want to be a part of it. Okay. So piling onto that news, and there was one other crypto lending firm that I was looking at that is about to go under as well. I can't remember the name of it at this point. But the New York sues former Celsius CEO over fraud in crypto collapse. And once again, this is a cryptocurrency lender, guys. And this is the folks that are going to be most affected by this, or people that are involved in cryptocurrency lending. Those are all looking to collapse here. There might be a few survivors, but I don't know who they are. And there's been a giant run on one of the banks recently. Almost $8.1 billion has the people have taken out in the last couple of months. And a couple of firms that are doing business with some of these firms that are going under have even decided to tell their their customers, hey man, you need to take your crypto offline. Okay, let me see here. All right. So in the UK and with more Tesla EV owners, there have been many images of Tesla EV owners queuing for hours to charge their car. EV companies need to lobby the UK government to build more. Yeah. So I think, I was actually thinking about this the other day. There are some giant social issues when it comes to electric vehicles. The big benefit in the United States of electric vehicles is 62% of American households live in single family households and not in apartments or condominiums or anything like that. And ostensibly, they're leaving the house every day with a fully charged vehicle. If you're driving like a 4-door passenger vehicle, it's more than likely that you come home from work, you can fully charge your Model 3 overnight in your garage or outside of your house, however that is done, and go to work the next day with a full battery. That is 62% of Americans. But that completely cuts out the rest of the folks who live in apartments and condominiums or just in highly dense areas where there's nowhere to charge on the street. So we are probably looking at a pretty big change in the way things are done. These are the exact same concerns that folks would have had back in the days when the horse and buggy was being, and when just the horse itself was being replaced by the automobile. There weren't enough gas stations to go around. When you look at the industrial production of all of the auto companies out there versus how fast it took, gas stations to catch up, that absolutely happened in those time periods as well. People were probably waiting for a very, very long time. And if you look, even by the beginning of the Great Depression, it wasn't just wealthy people that could afford cars. Cars were affordable by a large slice of the population by then, and you were already seeing some supply issues. And it took a while for the venture capital money. It wasn't called venture capital money. It was entrepreneur money to go into service stations and things like that. We're likely to see a real big change, because even with these new sodium ion batteries that I covered in the last live stream coming out, where it takes 15 minutes to charge, you're still likely waiting to charge your vehicle if you're an apartment owner or something like that, or apartment dweller, or I don't know what to call them, or if you're on a long trip or something like that. We're likely to see an additional sort of evolution in what a Buc-ee's looks like. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Buc-ee's, but if you're from Texas or maybe anywhere in the South, you probably know what either a Flying J's Plaza is or a Buc-ee's. And by the way, Buc-ee's is far superior. I'm just saying that right now, but Buc-ee's is far superior. But you're likely to see like gas stations kind of turn into entertainment stations and little mini malls. I'm talking about not gas stations, but charging stations turn into entertainment stations and little mini malls. You may even see a degree of full service come back where you leave your car in a line and then an attendant drives it up to recharge it, or at least or changes things like that and wipes your windshield down. Whatever, you may see a revival of something like that as well. Maybe that's all automated at some point. I don't know. But that is likely to change. And there's a huge social element to that as well. I don't believe that there's probably going to be incentives put in place to create charging for people that don't have the ability to charge at home, and for it to be done kind of at a cut rate. So yeah. So I'm still not up on crypto. Maybe somebody can point me in the right direction. Is blockchain and crypto the same thing? So blockchain is the underlying technology, and crypto is the medium of exchange that's on top of blockchain, right? So the blockchain technology is really just a way of registering and agreeing on transactions on the blockchain. And you know what? I'm going to do a really bad job of explaining this during a live stream by myself. I'm going to bring an expert on here. Okay. And this expert has been on the channel before, and we're going to talk about it. He hasn't wanted to talk about crypto lately. I kind of understand with everything that's going on. But if I limit the conversation to what is blockchain for beginners and what is crypto for beginners, I think that's probably a better idea. And then you guys can do some question and answer on there. And likely he won't want to answer directly questions about FTX or things like that, because the crypto industry has become quite fratricidal lately. So yeah, let me see here. But in the high density areas, you probably have public transit. Bram, if you spend a lot of time in the United States, you'd realize that outside of like New York City, Chicago, and the Boston area, people do not like public transit. And you are going to have the hardest time in the world getting Americans to use public transit. It's going to be very, very difficult to do. So I lived in Europe at one point. Everyone who doesn't have the money, time, space, or need to have a car just uses public transit. It's available and efficient. The layout of most cities, particularly in the South, is ridiculous for public transit. It takes you hours to get anywhere by bus. Something that would take you 30 minutes in a car, just in San Diego alone, it would take me 30 minutes by car to get to my university. It would take 4 hours by bus to get there. And that's one of the things I was looking at when I went to university there, is I didn't want to pay $600 per quarter for a parking permit, but it would have taken me 4 hours, one way to get to my university by bus. And it's partially because bus lines are so terrible. It's partially because our cities just aren't designed for efficient public transit, and they would have to be redesigned. So we see here. What surprises me is that the Bitcoin Ethereum price didn't massively react to the FTX collapse. Ethereum bottomed out months ago and never went back that actually really surprised me as well. Honestly, it surprised me so much that I still have a hard time believing it. And this goes back to me saying that there is no such thing as market fundamentals when it comes to Bitcoin and Ethereum. There is no sort of trading system for Bitcoin and Ethereum. There is nothing. The market reacts how the market reacts at this point. We don't have, we have correlation to a few things in the market that, in other markets that are out there. I wouldn't even say that those are solid. We just don't have enough data on that. And the market for any of those are not, is not very secure. So Shoeless Joe says, Binance surely will collapse soon. Yeah. And oddly enough, one of the things that's probably going to tip Binance over the top there is the $500 million investment that Binance made into Twitter. And I'm not sure exactly how that is booked, meaning if it was done under the CEO or if it was done under Binance, but they invested $500 million into Twitter. Twitter is not, well, they may not survive, but even if they do survive, I don't think you guys realize how much. I know you realize on the dollar amount how much Elon Musk paid for Twitter, but what he paid for Twitter, what he borrowed for Twitter, is more than double. He borrowed $14 billion for Twitter. It's more than double the profits that Twitter has made. Not last year, not the year before that, not in 2019 when they were profitable, but that's more than double the profits that Twitter has made in its entire existence. Okay. So you paid $44 billion to buy a company that hadn't been profitable for almost 3 years. You borrowed more than, I think, 2.5 times actually the total profits of the company. It had been making making money before as an advertising concern. You explicitly stated that the company can't be all about advertising, and yet we don't have a different revenue stream associated with this. The $8 a month that you're paying for verification, or $11 a month that someone's paying for verification, is not going to cut it in terms of profits. So this is a privately owned company now. There is no requirement for profit on the part of the overall owner of the company, which is Elon Musk. However, I'm sure what was likely presented to investors, and there were $30 billion of that came from various investors. They've already started to book losses on these loans out. By the way, meaning they're already recognizing them on their balance sheets, which means that if there isn't a plan for profit soon, and you can build a case that the value of Twitter was destroyed because of mismanagement or misrepresentation of what was in that investor investor deck. I think that the legal fees that Tesla is going to, or not Tesla, that Twitter is going to have for the next couple of years are just going to be outrageous. It's going to go a long way towards sucking out any profits that could be made out of the company. And so there's a lot going on there that I definitely don't want to touch. So but okay. So big news here that doesn't seem like big news that I wanted to talk about. And I first heard about this on the radio when I was driving to the doctor this morning. But the U.S. targets non-compete clauses that will block workers from getting better jobs, meaning the U.S. is looking to get rid of non-compete clauses. I mean, I think it's the Federal Trade Commission proposed a rule that would ban companies from requiring workers to sign non-compete provisions, as well as some training repayment agreements. So I live in a state where non-compete agreements. So in New York and in California, non-compete agreements are actually really, really hard to enforce because they're geographically bound. They're bound by time, and you basically can't limit someone from earning a living based on a non-compete, meaning that if you're a scientist that works at a company, you signed a non-compete clause. If you moved a company 20 miles away and started the business in the same industry, you still may not be liable for anything that goes on as long as you're not taking trade secrets with you. Right. So, and that's the case in many, many states. And these non-compete agreements don't have any teeth, but they serve to keep people in jobs because they think that they have teeth. Getting rid of them, I think, is a good idea and allows for more job mobility. It doesn't do anything to help us solve our labor crisis right now, meaning that it's still the non-compete to a degree prevents people from switching jobs and working their way up that income ladder in certain places. That barrier is now going to be removed. And so that barrier is now going to be removed. And we are probably looking at increased wage pressure from certain sectors of the economy if this is going to be removed. I don't know how significant that would be or not, but it's actually pretty good moves. Like pretty good news. There are lots of people that I know that have wanted to go out and start their own company based on an idea that they had, and they weren't able, or they didn't think they were able to do that because of a non-compete. And I even told people, hey, I'm not a lawyer or anything, but non-compete agreements in California are really hard to enforce, and customers don't belong to anyone. You can take customers with you when you leave a company. This has been true for a very, very long time. And I always tell them, hey, go talk to an attorney. This is just what I know from my personal experience. I'm not an attorney. I'm not giving you legal advice. But a lot of times they never even go talk to the attorney. They're just really scared by that non-compete that they sign. I think this is a good thing overall for workers, and this is a good thing for entrepreneurship. And that's just one of the things I wanted to share that was that was really important, that I think probably won't get a lot of attention. So yeah. Okay. So, do you guys want to hear about some of the techniques when it comes to genetic genealogy and how easy it is to find anyone right now? Why these crimes are being solved right now? A lot of it is from publicly traded 23andMe, publicly traded, not publicly traded, but publicly accessible database called GEDmatch, and through Ancestry. Based on that, essentially anyone can be found. Okay. And if you guys don't want me to talk about this, or you want to talk about stocks or something like that, let's bring it on. But I'm telling you, the DNA age, how it affects our everyday lives, how it affects solving crimes, how it affects our economy, how it really affects individually targeted medicines. This is already here. How it's going to be monetized, I don't have any freaking clue, because every company that I invested in that first wave of genomics companies back in like 2010, they all went under. Okay. And a lot of the companies that I like right now, I think are probably going to go under as well, especially if I don't understand their business plan and they haven't found a way to break it out and make it really simple for me to where I can understand it. It's likely not going to be understood by investors either. Like a lot of the big money investors out there really aren't all that technically savvy and they can't understand wizard speak. And they're probably going to lose a lot of support there. So I'm not trying to predict anything, but let's bring this on. Okay. So a lot of you guys know that I'm adopted, and 4 years ago, I didn't know a single person that I was related to. I took a DNA test, and initially, I did not hear. Initially, I didn't have any close matches. The closest match I had was someone who had 5% of my DNA, and they were not helpful. Then the next closest match I had was very little as well. So I had to start building basically family trees based on the ancestors that I shared very little DNA with, knowing that just based on math, meaning that you share 50% of your DNA with your parents, 25% with your grandparents, 12.5% with your great grandparents, 6.25% possibly with your great great grandparents. And there's a lot of variation between there because you're not going to inherit all of their DNA. In the United States, anywhere from the 1940s on back has a lot of inbreeding as well, and I mean, that's probably true everywhere. Before populations were mobile, before World War II, most people never walked more than 75 miles from their own home, and so it's pretty likely that you married at least a second or third cousin. So that complicates things going back. And then the further back you go, there's actually something called pedigree collapse, where once you get back about anywhere from 6 to 9 generations, almost all of us are related at that point. At least all of us from the same sort of ethnic group are going to be related between 6 and 9 generations back. Okay. So what happened is when I took this original DNA test, I had matches, right? And these are the matches that you get. You go through your ethnicity data and all. This is all publicly available, guys. I'm not sharing anything that shouldn't be shared. If you have a subscription to Ancestry, you'll get this too. So this guy was my first cousin, but he has no family tree and was not interested at all in talking to me. It took me like 2 years to get him to answer an email. And to be honest, he's kind of a jerk. And that's actually the case with most of the people on here, as they were jerks. And I'm understating jerk a lot. Most of them were terrible people, but I wanted to point out the people that really helped out because they're good people. Sherry and Charlotte, you guys are awesome. And what has been the case going through my biological family is that the women are okay usually, and the dudes are total shitbags. Okay, and that's probably going to cause this to be demonetized. But I didn't have a ton of information. And what broke this open for me was really being matched to uh, this person way down here, Lindsay Perry, who I share 114 centimorgans with, which is centimorgans is a term that was developed that describes DNA that you share with someone and the length of that DNA that you share with someone. It's not something that actual DNA scientists use a lot. It's something that's kind of developed just for this sort of business, right? So this person had built a partial family tree. So at this point, I didn't know, like, for me, it was really easy to figure out who are my maternal matches and who are my paternal matches because my maternal contributor came from overseas and they were fresh off the boat. So it was easy for me to exclude a lot of people. And the other thing, the people from my maternal side, there were only like 30 people that had the smallest relationship with me. I'm talking well under 1/10 of 1% when I first did this. But I had like 20,000 matches on my biological family side from the father's side. Now today it's about 40,000. Okay, and let's talk about why this is important. this is not a family that's done very much. There's nobody famous in this family. They have never been wealthy. There's not a lot of property held in this family. They are a lot of them end up in prison. A lot of them have ended up having no property whatsoever, and it makes them really hard to track in historical records other than through the census. And then, of course, a lot of people don't answer the census. I think one of the things that surprised me the most is how many people were involved in the census that were like in my direct line here. But so this is kind of the interesting thing, and I'm trying to find this person right now. This is Colt Coop. This is I know exactly how he's related. He's actually my second cousin twice removed. He is a little bit less than 1% related to me, but I know exactly how he's related to me because of the backward relationship and how we built family trees to trace each other down. So all I knew is that I was related to him and he was related to me. I knew that it's through my father's side and his father's side because he didn't know we didn't even know it was through his father's side. And ironically, I'm related to both sides of his family. But he didn't know who his father was. I didn't know who either one of my parents were. And we ended up helping each other navigate 23andMe, GEDmatch, and Ancestry in order to find this out. So this is all that you have, which is 93 centimorgans. And so I ended up meeting him first on 23andMe. I ended up sending him the ancestry test because he just had kind of lost hope at that point. He never thought he'd figure out who his father was. I sent him an ancestry test. We got a slightly better match on this result. But when I saw his 23andMe results and I realized the amount of DNA that we don't share on our X chromosome, which means that it's likely that we have a male ancestor in common rather than a female ancestor in common, it suddenly got a lot harder or a lot easier rather to track and start building out a family tree. So the problem is we're both from an area where originally where records are not great. They only go back to about the 1900s. A lot of them are incomplete. And a lot of these people were so desperately poor that, they didn't register for Social Security numbers until it was time to be drafted for World War II or something like that. Right. So there's a lot going on in there when it comes to figuring out who these people are. And by the way, I know how everyone is related to me from here all the way up to the top. Okay. And if you commit a crime, a really heinous crime, and you are related to me, the police will know instantly. Okay. And I'm going to show you how this works. And this is, and remember all of the data collected here. It's not just the data that they use to identify you with. It's also the DNA data that they're collecting for everything else that makes you a human being. All of the gene associations that you're able to derive a lot of information about the health and appearance of an individual simply by all the DNA that's collected here. Not only that, they don't need to have your DNA to figure out who you are. They can do that based on everyone else that is in here. So I'm going to go to the family tree right here. And I've told people before who keep asking me to, people keep asking me not to say things on here, but because I'm adopted and my opinion is that it's my family history too. I don't care what people think anymore, but I'm going to start here with my great grandmother. My great-great-grandmother, and this is a picture of her. She was born in 1834 and died in 1918. First of all, there aren't a lot of pictures of people who were born in 1834, and a lot of people don't even know who their great-great-grandmother was. And let's remember, I didn't know who any of my relatives were until like 4 years ago. So I'm trying to figure out who this person is that I'm related to. I know that I have a DNA relationship to them where our closest, by math, our very closest common ancestor would have to be a great grandparent on my side. And I knew that had to be true because it is entirely likely, because of the age of my grandfather and the age of my biological father, that there are likely to be more generations on his side than there are on mine. And these are some of the things that these police folks are encountering when they do genetic genealogy, is even that 1% is not really telling you the whole story. Like on paper, I should share about 6.25% with anyone that shares these two great-grandparents in as a common ancestor. In reality, though, it's likely that there's an extra generation or two sandwiched in between me and you. So you and I are going to share less DNA than it may seem like. And also because there's no overlap, because the populations that I come from are completely separate. So if you're like, say, English and you have German and Norwegian and French or whatever, there's likely some overlap in there that is interpreted incorrectly as being like regional DNA or personal DNA, and makes your percentages a little bit artificially high. My percentage of relationship with someone is usually going to be probably closer to that mean or a little bit low, which actually makes it clearer for solid identification, right? So the idea was to figure out if I was related to this person from this set of great grandparents or this set of great grandparents. And the tools from 23andMe and Ancestry at the time didn't actually allow you to separate out based on that type of ancestry. They do now, but I had to do that by building family trees and then seeing if my relative had any relationship to this side of the family or any relationship to this side of the family. So as it turned out, this gentleman turned out to be related to Sarah Cassidy and Newton L. Smith. Now, we knew that in this background, there was also a Smith name, but that's utterly meaningless because everyone has Smith in their family background at this point. But I knew that they had to be related to Samuel L. Smith, or Newton L. Smith, which my biological grandmother, the one who was presumed to be murdered in 1924, who turned out not to be murdered in 1924, she faked her own death, abandoned her family, and moved to Boston and had a whole new family. That's a great story, by the way. When I tell people that, hey, I solved a murder mystery using DNA, that's what I'm talking about. My biological siblings all believed that their grandfather murdered their grandmother for their entire life. Can you imagine what a douche you have to be to run around telling everyone that you murdered your wife for 60 years rather than admit that she left you for another man? But that is exactly what happened. This guy, William Manning, right here, is a total douchebag. He's my grandfather. So anyway, I knew that the person, Colt Coop, and I had to be related through Stella Mae Smith, or one generation back to Sarah Cassidy. So what I ended up doing here is going back and finding she didn't actually have 13 siblings. Some of these are duplicates. But I had to go back and find out who her siblings were, who all those descendants were. I had to find out who her children were and who all of those descendants were. But basically what it came down to is I built family trees for every single person on here using public records, using birth records, marriage records, baptisms, property. And what I found out was that that my grandmother and this person's great grandmother were actually siblings. So my great grandmother, my grandmother was a woman named Stella Smith, and his great grandmother, Colt's great grandmother, was a person named Anna G. Smith. And I did that by working backwards to that likely common ancestor, and then working back forwards and finding out basically all 13 of these people right here I built family trees for, and then keep going down until I didn't actually want you guys to see some of those relatives. It was really brief, and keep working down until we got to the relatives on his side. So if you can do this with me, I have no idea who my biological relatives are. I didn't have any matches greater than 5%, and just using public records, DNA, math, Bayesian reasoning, I'm able to find out all this stuff. If a layman with very little knowledge of how this works, and this is one of the other tools we use, which is GEDmatch. So in GEDmatch, you can upload your DNA from 23andMe, from Mofang, from WeGene, from Ancestry, from any other DNA data source here. You can upload your DNA here, and this is searchable by law enforcement. In fact, you have to opt in. Before you had to opt out, so where law enforcement couldn't search it. Now you have to opt in so it can be searched. I allowed mine to opt in because a couple members of my family were already connected to some pretty heinous crimes. And if my DNA can help, I was going to let it help. And all I can say is if you are a descendant, this is another funny thing here. Funny thing. Let me see here. This lady right here, Mary E. Fitzpatrick. She had a child with my biological great grandfather. She was never married to him, but she married a guy named Dwayne Galloway, James Dwayne Galloway. I have proven through DNA that she had a biological son with my great grandfather, but none of the children of James Dwayne Galloway and her are actually his children. Not only that, they all actually have different fathers. And I've contacted some of the descendants. They don't believe me about that. And it's actually easily provable because he was married 2 other times and had 6 other children from the 2 previous marriages. And I have no genetic relationship to any of those other Galloways or Plumbers, or I can't remember the other names, but I have no genetic relation to them, even though I proved that many of them have taken DNA tests, which mean that James Dwayne Galloway was not the contributor of Y-DNA to Jesse Galloway, or sorry, of DNA to Jesse, Vernie, Joseph, Kenny Galloway, Ollie Galloway, or, Peter Galloway, any of those people. He was not the father of any of those people. Not only that, it's actually pretty easily provable that all of them have separate fathers. And before I met anyone from that side of the family, I ended up thinking to myself, my great grandmother got around. She was likely to be a lady of the night, right? Had no idea whether that was true. And I even postulated that they owned a riverboat or a shanty boat. And that's where business was conducted because the burials and births were all along the Ohio River and nowhere else, basically. Basically from Portsmouth down to like Vanceburg and a couple of miles each direction. That's where all the births and deaths were. And it made it, and that postulation was really just guessing based on context clues. It turns out that was true. And the person that I told that to, like, you could see her jaw drop. She's like, how the hell did you know that? Like, how would you know that? It's nowhere in history. So this is really interesting. And this lady, Mary Fitzpatrick Galloway, she was actually murdered in 1929. She was shot. She and her daughter were shot by her daughter's jealous husband for reasons that escape me. His name is Joseph Locke. And and so that's very, very interesting. So this group of people right here, in this whole generation, produced a wave of misery for the states of Kentucky and Ohio, right? A wave of misery. Like, you can go to Portsmouth, Ohio today and just Google the name Galloway and crimes, and it's everywhere. It's just everywhere. You can look at Portsmouth, Ohio. Look at the crime rankings for Portsmouth, Ohio on Neighborhood Scout. It's basically in the top 2% of crime, meaning that 98% of cities in the United States are safer than Portsmouth, Ohio, which is where this clan was situated. So, and the amount of children that were adopted out of this clan is unbelievable. I've already had like 3 people contact me. I think there's more than 24 people descended from this generation right here that were adopted out. And I can tell you that what everyone in the family told me when I contacted them was, you should be glad that you were adopted and never had to meet these people. So they've all said that. So I'm actually really thankful for that. Not only that, when you look at my own grandfather here, you look at, he had at least 2 separate families. My grandmother, like secret families. You look at my grandmother, she had a secret family. In fact, I'm descended from the secret family. So the idea that there was good old days, not true. The idea that people got married and stayed married, it's not true. They simply abandoned their spouses and got new spouses. That's what they did instead of getting a divorce. I have dozens of cases where this happened. The other thing that's always true is that anytime someone has contacted me, not just from this family, my family, biological family, but from any other family, because they got around online that I was pretty good at this. The answer to the question is, I've got a DNA mystery. The answer is always, the person you think of the father is not the father. But I wouldn't make any judgments on why the person you think of the father isn't the father, because it's a lot more complex than the wife cheating on the husband. It's way more complex than that. Don't make any judgments. And you may not even want to bring it up. But holy smokes. So this is the thing. If I can find this out without knowing anyone that I'm related to, if you leave your DNA at a crime scene, and trust me, the generalized appearance or description or profile that came out of this, I almost guarantee you that they sent the DNA sample to Parabon Nano Labs. And you can go on Parabon Nano Labs website and you will see actually reproductions of a physical appearance of what you would likely look like based on your DNA. And it is hauntingly similar to what I mean. When you compare this to what Parabon Nanolabs predicts, based on what these people actually look like, it is hauntingly similar. They'll say they'll get eye color right, hair color right, general body composition right. Like this person's a little bit overweight. They're 5'10" and 210 pounds, and they're going to be a little bit chunky through the middle. It is eerily good. It's a little bit off when it comes to facial features, but maybe that has something to do with the way I identify facial features. I don't know. But the idea that you can go out and commit a crime, even if you have never committed the crime, leave the tiniest sliver of DNA somewhere, even something considered environmental DNA at this point, a single skin cell that flakes off of you, a single fingerprint in which oil that contains your DNA is lifted from something. Not your fingerprint, your arm brushes up against a doorknob or any hard surface where you're going to leave oils. You will be identified as long as that is collected correctly. And if it's in the proper context, they're going to get you. And this is half of the reason why. It's not just getting the DNA profile that's important. It's that if you get the DNA profile, I don't need you to find you. Like I've been contacted by numerous people to solve different mysteries when it comes to this particular family, and the smallest sort of DNA. It's probably because I posted this in a couple of like Facebook groups, and I've been contacted by people that had questions. And so there was an issue where I thought that my own, a very close relative of mine was responsible for a rather heinous murder that was solved earlier this year, by the way. And it was not my biological, this relative that I thought it was. But I was able to get an answer back from that police department that I called based on me releasing my information to them through GEDmatch. Within 15 minutes, they were able to tell me, your relative did not commit this crime. And that relative had been on that list of suspects, one of 5 suspects for 55 years. Okay. And that was, it was extremely interesting to see how quickly they were able to get back to me on that. And the thing is I am probably the hardest person to identify from this family tree. Not simply because I was adopted, but also because my very existence was concealed in every possible way. None of my biological siblings knew that I existed. We had a second brother that they did not know, who was born before them, who they didn't know. So I was the youngest, and then my eldest half brother as well. Nobody had any idea that he existed as well. And I stumbled across him by random chance with a search of birth records using my biological father's name. I happened to find a birth certificate, and I was able to use basically public records to trace this half brother's life. And I got really excited as it got closer and closer to the present time. And then I realized he died 2 weeks before I figured out he existed. 2 weeks before. 2 weeks before I figured out I had a brother, he died. So that's amazing. So yeah. So as a retired law enforcement agent, I can tell you that DNA contamination is a big issue. To get a single uncorrupted DNA sample is rare. DNA transfer is also an issue. It's becoming less of an issue because of new ways to separate it out. And they're actually using like bacteria in this process. I need to send you the article that I read on this recently. And this is something that's already being used. And there are computer models that people are using also to reconstruct what DNA would look like. Like that in particular would not be admissible in court, but it's going to point you in the right direction, right? And then you're able to re-get DNA samples. And also remember, with new what's called environmental DNA techniques, we're able to get a lot more out of it. Pretty soon, you're going to be nailed because of the DNA found in pollen from dirt that you tracked in from your job site, which we can now connect to small slivers of eDNA that you left behind that was corrupted. That is going to be an issue as well. You always have to look back and say, hey, there might be an explanation for why this person's DNA that's in the apartment that may not actually connect them to the crime, which is kind of what I worried about with this, with these Idaho murders, is that this is a party house. Lots of people are going in and out. If you really want to mess up the investigation, then that guy should have gone in and out of the house during a party or something and be able to prove it at that time period. It would have been kind of hard to say that his DNA is there, but apparently they found it on the sheath that was left behind. But I read through the affidavit today of probable cause, and I think even without DNA evidence, just from the electronic trail that he left with data usage from his phone in association with location data, and the fact that there's so much like Ring doorbell coverage of all this stuff, and that the circumstantial case around him was so solid anyway, even without the DNA, that I think this case is basically over. It's just going to take a year or two to wrap it up. Let's see. Do you talk to any of your brothers, friends, or relatives? A little bit, not that much. They're not all that interested in having a relationship, I think, and they have their own very busy lives. And I basically just like burst onto the scene, and they had no idea that I existed. And we're very different people. Also, we are very, very different people with different beliefs. Let's put it that way. But also, yeah. So like my siblings basically kind of sort of escaped. They've all got issues, like serious issues, but they sort of escaped the real damaging things that the rest of the family went through. But there is a streak of criminality that runs through the family that is utterly undeniable, that cannot simply be explained by poverty. It can't. When you look at the cruelty of things that were committed. So it's something that I'm very conscious of. I'm like I go out of my way now to be like extra polite and nice to people, to be extra considerate of other people's thoughts and feelings. Before I would just not care about those things, but now I am paying much more close attention to the type of impression that I'm leaving behind on the world, because I figured all this out about my biological family. So, and this is, by the way, a biological family is not dying out anytime soon. It really isn't dying out anytime soon. So, if you're from the Portsmouth, Ohio area and your last name is Sword, Manning, Galloway, Howard, let's see, Hammond, Smith, Tackett, we're related. So we're related if you're from the Southern Ohio area at all. But yeah, so very interesting. It's very interesting, all of the denialism around what is going on too. And the amount of people that are just utterly, utterly racist that I encountered via social media or on the phone when speaking. And it was shocking. I never thought that I would be a hillbilly before I took a DNA test. It's been a pretty amazing experience. Positive in a lot of ways, neutral in a lot of ways too. So, but that's one of the things I wanted to cover though. So 23andMe is a public company, and they've never really been profitable. And people are saying, how are you going to make money? So building these law enforcement, and remember, law enforcement has to compensate these databases, just like the FBI has to compensate Twitter when they ask for documents and things like that. And now, people are saying, "Oh, I paid Twitter to censor it." That's not true. Anytime you subpoena documents or require document delivery, you have to pay a fee to do that. That was a court case that goes back a long time ago. I do admit $3.4 million. That's a lot of money, but think about all of the lawsuits that go on, or cases that go on where your social media is going to be used against you now, right? That's a huge thing. 23andMe at some point will probably start making, and Ancestry as well, will probably start making a significant portion of their, I don't know how significant it's going to be, but it's going to be in the millions of dollars that they're making based on inquiries to their database, based on the amount of data that they collected. Because it's not just this Ancestry stuff. This Ancestry stuff literally is 1/10 of 1% of your 7 billion base pairs. Is it 7 billion? Or is it 3? Or am I thinking 3.5 billion base per 7? Okay. Anyway, whatever that is. It's only 1/10 of 1% of that makes you an individual. Most of the rest of that is encoding for proteins and the things that make you human, not an individual. So there's a lot more data being collected than just this Ancestry stuff. This Ancestry stuff really isn't all that important, compared to all of the other data that they're gathering. Particularly, it's probably the same thing with Ancestry DNA, but I know particularly with 23andMe, they really targeted the healthcare industry and sharing that data and the insights derived from that data with the healthcare industry. And that's kind of the big thing. How this shakes out in terms of the money they make is nobody knows. If you guys have any questions about this process, though, or if you have your own questions or issues when it comes to Shoeless Joe, if some of your viewers wanted to do this, can you recommend where to start? Actually, Shoeless Joe, I know you're in the UK, and people in the UK, one of the things I found out, a lot of them didn't know that they were adopted, or they were like Irish kids. A lot of times they were adopted, and they didn't necessarily know that they were. And the Irish government and Catholic Church has made it kind of hard to figure out who your parents were. The bad thing about that too is the data. Well, maybe that's improved since the last time I looked, but the data associated with Ireland and with UK wasn't the greatest because kits went on sale a little bit later, and then the database just didn't have as good a coverage of the population there. But I'd be happy to check into that for you. Sign up for Ancestry. We can drop in a Zoom meeting or something like that, and I can help you out and talk about possibilities. If you look at the relationships that 23andMe and Ancestry estimate, you really have to look at those as like Pirates of the Caribbean. They're not really rules, they're guidelines. They're just guidelines, and the actual relationship can be pretty far off from the predicted relationship. So my predicted relationships by Ancestry and 23andMe were almost all incorrect. And like I said, part of that had to do with my divided ancestry coming from two different continents. Part of that had to do with possible inbreeding on the father side of the family, and not really like severe. I'm talking about what's normal for everyone that was in a relatively static portion of the region for a very long time. That's going to happen. If you stay there for more than 2 or 3 generations, it's likely that one of your relatives married a second or third cousin, and that's going to mess up those DNA relationships to a degree. And it's also likely that if you come from any particular ethnic group, if you go back 6 to 9 generations in that ethnic group, you will be related. So, let me see. Fascinating. I knew my maternal grandmother. My dad grew up in an orphanage in the Netherlands. So all I would say is take one of those tests and figure out what's going on. And if you have questions, I can help you out. If you send me an email at this point, it's been out on YouTube for so long that I get tons of junk mail and don't read religiously anymore. But if you send me an email, I'll try to find it. If not, the best way to get in contact with me is to join that Patreon or try to get my attention on a live stream or something like that, and I'll be able to take care of it. Anyway, that was kind of a little bit off subject, and I really stretched it to make it work with the financial angle of this channel. But it's just some of the things that I really kind of wanted to cover, and I'm not embarrassed by any of this. This is what most people's pasts look like. DNA doesn't lie, but people do all the time. And if you've ever been the kind of person to make fun of somebody because of the background where they came from, be careful I don't hear about it, because I can ruin your life. Okay. And it's really easy to do because there's stories in there for everyone. Basically your ancestors weren't walking around swinging swords in armor and rescuing damsels and maidens in trouble. Mostly what they were doing is barely surviving. Small, skinny guys who were sick all the time, on the edge of starvation, and barely made it. That's why I don't really judge these people at least 2 or 3 generations back in the past. I don't judge them for the things that they did. Anyway, thank you so much for paying attention today, guys. I actually have got to get going at this point, but this one was kind of entertaining for me. And if you guys want to know anything else, I'm happy to share. If you guys have any questions about your own background, I'm happy to help you guys out as well. Nobody who helps people out like this ever charges anything for that or anything. If you have questions, just ask. Anybody can be found at this point. Have a good day, guys, and I'll be back on Monday for sure. Thank you so much.